And welcome back to the SPIMA Council podcast. On today's episode, we will be joined by Jason Maglantay from Tennis Canada, and I'm your host Jackson Prelli, and on the hosting side today is Madeline Grossi, who is our podcast administrator. So I'm going to pass it over to Madeline to introduce our guest today.
Thanks, Jackson. Today we're super excited to have Jason on. He's the current Regional Director of Stadium Sales and Service at Tennis Canada. Jason has a wealth of knowledge in the sport industry, previously working for the CFL, the Ottawa Renegades, and the Toronto Rock, as well as multiple different positions across the Tennis Canada organization. Jason graduated from the University of Windsor with a Bachelor of Human Kinetics, Leisure, and Sport Management. Most of Jason's experience is within the sales department, and we are pleased to welcome him as our third guest of Season 4 on the SPIMA Council podcast. Thanks for coming, Jason.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it. And I'm looking forward to today, actually. I prepped for this, so I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well, we'll get started then. Can you start off by telling us a little bit about your story and your current role with Tennis Canada?
So I don't like this question for two reasons. One, it ages myself because there's a lot of nuances within my story, and it's probably not your typical story that you've heard in front of sports management or sports business. So 1998. So I don't know if half of you were born then. But 1998 was my third year University of Windsor. And there was a job, as we all go through looking for summer positions. I wanted to come home back to Toronto. I was looking for a summer job. And I was actually invited to apply for a ticket sales position for, at the time, was the Demorier Open, which is a tennis event here at York University at the time. That's when cigarette sponsorships were allowed for sports. And so I applied. And I lived in East Scarborough. So it took me about 2.5 hours to get to York University by public transit. I interviewed with, at the time, it was the chief marketing officer. His name was Scott McPherson. And who he reported to, Stacey Allister, who we'll get into in later on in the podcast, who's been one of my mentors. But so that was my application interview process. I went through 2 rounds of interviews, and luckily I was chosen for the seasonal summer sales team for the Demorier Open in 1998. So that was my first official sales job, first official ticket sales job in sports. And obviously I was pretty excited because of my backstory. I played ice hockey all my life, but I picked up a tennis racket when I was age 9 and 10 and really fell in love with the sport. So this job, this summer position, that was really pretty excited. I went back to school because the interview was in the winter time. I went back to school, told all my friends, and ready to get started this summer of '98. And I was part of a team of 6, and not to sound arrogant, but I really, really wanted to work in sports. Obviously, having a degree in human connections, leisure sports management. So I put my nose to the ground and really worked hard and really, really did a good job. And sort of we broke records that year. It was a special year. It was a women's event. The WTA Tour was in town in Toronto, much smaller stadium at the time. I did so well that at the end of the event that they asked me back if I was available for the following year in '99. And sort of the lesson learned there for me was just really just put your head down and get to work. If you really want something, just really work your tail off and sort of network with internally. And I befriended a couple of people within Tennis Canada organization. One of them was Stacey Allister at the time, who's now one of synonymous for Canadian sports business across our country in the U.S. and her influence in tennis specifically, internationally, but just in Canada in general. And then in 1999, I came back in a different role. I was actually a group sales manager. So a little bit more of a B2B aspect because I was calling businesses to bring groups out, employees out for the Demorier Open that was still at the time, and sort of did that really, really well. And for that year, they asked me to come back after I graduated, which my graduation year, again, aging myself, this is why I hate the question. I graduated in 2000. Again, I don't know if you guys were born yet, but graduated from University of
I
Windsor.
was going to say, still not bored.
Still not born.
More years.
Graduation year 2000, University of Windsor, and which was great at that point is that I already had a job lined up. I accepted the offer to go back to Tennis Canada for a third year, not just for the summer, but it was actually a 10-month contract. And so I was pretty excited to graduate and get started. At that time, there was the banning of cigarette sponsorship, alcohol sponsorships for sporting events. Actually, no, not alcohol, but cigarette sponsorships. And Rogers was coming in. Actually, Rogers AT&T was the company going to rebrand the event in the year 2000. And obviously, Stacey was a really big part of that, so I really wanted to be part of that event. And so 2000 came around, and I didn't finish that summer though at the tennis event. Through back channel conversations or word of mouth, I got called from Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. And at Maple Leaf Sports Entertainment, they gave me a shout and said, "Hey, listen, we have this opening for you, and we think you'd be perfect for the job." And at the time, a good friend of mine was working there as well on the Raptors side, and the job was really just taking a hold of the Toronto Rock Lacrosse Club and managing their transition from Maple Leaf Gardens to at that time the Air Canada Centre, because the team was going to play there at home, for their home games because Maple Leaf Gardens was closing down, and they needed someone to manage the account on their ticket sales and marketing side. And sort of my name came up, and sort of again, one interview, the ownership group was part of the Waters family. If you're not familiar with them, Bill Waters was the assistant general manager at Toronto Maple Leafs at the time. Brad Waters, the son, was actually the co-owner. They had some private investors for the team, and Brendan Shanahan was also part of the ownership group. It's sort of that group of individuals really wanted to elevate the Toronto Rock Lacrosse Club from Maple Leaf Gardens into their Air Canada Centre and really sell it out. Now that year, it was tough for me because I was here at tennis. I had this offer. It was a full-time offer versus a 10-month contract. And sort of I chose to go with Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. It sort of worked there for a couple of years. And fast forward to the story. I remember this Brothers Day. It was March of 2001, and Brad Waters asked me to go into his office, and he said to me, "Hey, listen, I got two more guys that are coming in as investors, and we want to bring the CFL back to Ottawa. Would you be willing to move to Ottawa? Because I want you to run the ticketing and marketing, sort of the whole operations for that team." So I was 24 at the time. And you can imagine sort of the responsibility for that and bringing a professional sports team back to the state of Ottawa with a rich history in Canadian Football League that hasn't seen Canadian football in a few years. And pretty much the past ownership groups for the Ottawa Rough Riders at the time really messed up that whole market in terms of professional sports for Canadian football. But this was a huge challenge. Of course, I said, yes, let's do it. Right? We've had great experience with the Toronto Rock at Maple Leaf Sports and Entertainment. Great partnership. We won a championship in 2002. We were selling out crowds. We had a partnership with the Score Media back then. They had a channel back then, and it was a hell of a ride. Sort of, let's continue this to Ottawa. Not only that, but the ownership group got clearance for two more National Professional League lacrosse teams. So we brought an Ottawa NLL franchise, and we played at the Canadian Tire Centre, which is now, before it was the old arena, I guess, in Ottawa, Canada. We brought a professional box lacrosse team there, and then we also brought a professional box lacrosse in Montreal, the Montreal Express. So that year, I was managing 4 professional sports teams. The Ottawa Renegades, trying to build them back to the CFL. From 2002 to 2004, with the Ottawa National Lacrosse League team in Ottawa, and the Montreal Express National League box lacrosse team, and the Toronto Rock. So I was literally pretty lucky in terms of my story to gain all this experience, because not only I was in sales and marketing, but finance and promotions, communications of all those 4 teams. So I was traveling between Toronto, Ottawa, and Montreal quite extensively for a couple of years there. And sort of that's the breadth of sort of all the experience I was getting because I was involved. I was like an octopus. I was getting my hands into every little part of sports business, and touching on all aspects of it, which was a hell of a ride, to be honest. In 2004, I got another call. At the time, I was the vice president of partnership here at Tennis Canada. It was also reporting to Stacy. Stacy was managing pretty much the event. In 2004, I got a call saying that they're going to build a brand new venue at York University for the tennis event, and they needed somebody to come in and at that time, obviously sell tickets, but they needed a lot of help in their premium and private suites sales in marketing. And so I was called upon sort of my relationship from 2000 as I left. I maintained, didn't burn any bridges, and my name came up. I said no initially. I said, no, I can't. I'm like managing all these 4 teams. I'm trying to build, the market for CFL back in Ottawa. We're doing great things. The team was doing exceptionally well. I was traveling, get to go to Grey Cups across Canada at the time. And, but for personal reasons that I didn't want to get into it, my mom was sick at the time in 2004. So that was the trigger for me to come back to Tennis Canada in 2004. So I decided 6 months later, they called me back again, actually, say, hey, we couldn't find anybody. Would you like to come back to Tennis Canada? So I said yes. So I decided to come back here from 2004 to 2008. And then I got another call again from IMG. Now, IMG, as you know, is an international management group. They do a lot of different things in sports media. Their name has changed to something different now these days, but they needed somebody to do sponsorship and analytics for their event properties and for their players, the athletes that they represented. Initially, I said no because I was here. I was shaking and baking here at Tennis Canada for 4 years, from 04 and 08 for the events. And in sort of the retrospect, my decision was based on finances. Honestly, like ING said, hey, listen, we'll pay you a little bit more. Come down and work. So I worked there for a year, and it was a great opportunity for me to really network, not just in Canada, but it made me be able to network internationally. So I made a lot of contacts internationally. I still close to tennis because IMG, owns a lot of tennis events. They also represented a lot of tennis players at the time. And then after a year, I think it wasn't for me. But again, Tennis Canada called me back. I didn't apply. I didn't send my resume. They just called me back and say, hey, listen, would you like to come back? They 2009, you've been there for a year. Would you like to come back on that more senior level? And I said, okay, let's give it a shot. Let's come back. The event was growing. Canadian tennis was growing at the time. So 2009 all the way to 2018. So I stayed here for the 9 years, working with the sales team on the premium hospitality and sponsorship side. Did a little bit of corporate partnerships as well. And then in 2018, I got another call as my story continues, and I aged myself. A friend of mine who I worked with at IMG was now the vice president CRO at the Canadian Football League, and they knew I had some experience within the CFL on the team side. But working for the league would be an interesting challenge. So the position itself there was with their data analytics team. Basically, the role would be a league representative to support the 9 Canadian football teams on how to sell tickets better using data analytics. As we all know, technology from 14 to now really impacted sports business and the industry, like all industries. But I think all of us here in Canada were kind of slow to the adaptation of incorporating analytics on the business side. Obviously, player analytics was doing a lot of this with technology, but not really on the business side. And CFL wanted to get to that level. So they were creating this team that I would be a part of. This is where my math really helped, is we take analytics and sort of the insights that we get from all the 9 teams. We developed sort of a consulting arm, per se, at the CFL. And we would consult with the 9 teams of how to drive more revenue, whether it be game day, food and beverage, ticket sales primarily, hospitality, premium, a little bit of sponsorship. Then COVID hit, right, 2020. and sort of we lost the season, and sort of we lost that team was lost. Some other people came football. These are really good people. Unfortunately, we all got laid off. And again, back here, Tennis Canada, they called me back, say, hey, would you be interested in coming back in more of the director role? And I bummed and hummed a little bit because I was looking at areas in the technology space. But this is home for me, I think, for a little bit, for a lot of reasons. The position itself of the organization, there's a lot of purpose to this organization. We're changing lives, we're impacting lives all across Canada through the vehicle of the sport tennis. And at the time, I think we all know that we are at the golden age, the golden era of Canadian tennis, with all our top tennis players. So for me, a little mull and all, but it was a no-brainer for me to come back. And sort of I've been back here since January of this year. So in a nutshell, that is my story. I think it took about 12 minutes. It's because I'm old and I've been around the block to a lot of different organizations. But sort of that is a little bit about my path. Pretty like up and down all around, but landed in this leadership role. And here at Tennis Canada, it's amazing. It's great. It's a great place to work. The people here are unbelievable. Hence why I came back here. It's at the end, it's more the people, the purpose that we have here.
No, what I learned is your phone seems to always be ringing. Never on do not disturb over there. Always having a call.
Yeah, but I can ignore it. I can forward it now instead of answering.
So based on your avenue, sounds like you have a lot of like experience selling tickets like across like multiple events. Like, what's the biggest challenge of selling sports tickets? Like, just in terms of like a tennis event, for example. Like, what are some useful strategies you use in terms of selling tickets?
Tickets itself, I think, it's obviously the business of evolved more than anything, right? There's so much analytics involved now. Same with like player analytics. Like there's a lot of Ticketmaster, for example, a great partner of ours. It's literally a data company, right? They have a lot of consumer data. And I think selling sports tickets or just event tickets in general, I think COVID has really just pent up that demand now. So selling tickets, I don't think is a challenge now. I think people thirst for it more. I think their live events is back. I'm just saying, just today, today's times, you see it now more than ever. Like shows are being sold out, concerts are being sold out. Our events sold out, 2 or 3 days. Granted, some announcements with Serena Williams, but people wanted to come. And people want to go out. People want to invest their dollars in live experiences and live events. So the challenge is there, but I guess it's not there, is what I'm trying to say. Kind of hypocrite in that way. But sort of the biggest challenge specifically with tennis is really, I think I'll touch on Toronto specifically. Toronto specifically is a crowded marketplace, right? Like, so if you go down the tiers of what choice a consumer has or sports fans has here, specifically Toronto, I mean, there's plenty, right? All four major leagues are here except for the NFL, but Buffalo, the Bills are just down the street if you want to go to a Bills game. But we have CFL football here. We have our city is a mecca of events, live shows, concerts, like you name it. There's something going on every single night here in Toronto. So our biggest challenge is really just the attention, right? How do we break through? And sort of the strategies that we have, thankfully, fortunately based on sort of the other side of the office, our development team, we've developed really great tennis players, really great athletes, personalities in the last, 10 years. Like we are in the golden age of tennis, and sort of the strategies for our event specifically really highlight that. I really highlight sort of our tennis event. We leverage our partners. Our partners have been amazing. The National Bank Financial, as well as Rogers Communications for years. There's a reason why they've been partners for us for over 10 years. Is because they love the event, they support the event. So the strategies is really working with our partners and really getting the message out that this is the place to be. And it's not just a tennis event. We're unique in some of the other, sports events or concert events. Our average fan spends 5 to 6 hours on site during our event. Like that is a lot of time. So it's not just tennis, right? There's plenty of things going on site. The thing that we get, and maybe Maddie experienced this past summer, is that people don't know when they come on site of all the other things that are going on outside our center court. We have activations, we have a great food court, we have all these things that are happening to enhance the fan experience So our strategy really is to highlight that along with the tennis. It's sort of like we bring a tennis match to the party, or who brought the tennis match to the party. And sort of that's sort of our strategy specifically. Again, leveraging our corporate partners to really get the message out, leveraging their channels of communication. And sort of that's how we get our message out. How do we convert people to become tennis fans? Not even just tennis fans, just event fans. And sort of, but the biggest challenge really in our marketplace is trying to break through the attention and sort of everything that around is going in Toronto. In Montreal, it's different. Their market is really have an event market. They love the event. The National Bank Open in Montreal sells out every year. Doesn't matter. It's just it's a calendar event in the summer for the Montreal marketplace, and it just sells out every year. So their challenge is really is just building more seats.
I think it's good for sports organizations for sure. After COVID, people are trying to justify why they're buying tickets and why they're doing so many things, which is great for us because more organizations are selling more tickets. But eventually, that's going to catch up to people after 3 or 4 years after COVID, saying, "Oh, I'm making up for my lost time." Eventually, you're going to think, "Well, I've been doing this for 3 years," but it's good for us. And yeah, going back to your point before when you said people don't necessarily know all of the things that they can do when they come to an event. I even experienced this summer like some fans were mad because they didn't know all of the things that they could do and they got sidetracked at a different game and then they looked at their watch and it was time for the center court match but they had like missed it and they were like, well, what am I supposed to do? So it's like you get sidetracked because there's so many great matches and things to do while you're there. You don't realize where the time goes, and I think that's why people spend upwards of 5 or 6 hours on site. So it's pretty interesting.
And Maddie, you make a great point. Listen, it's not all cherry and strawberries here. Like we do have our challenges, and sort of, I think our biggest challenge is just getting the message out. Right? Is sort of like how do we deliver a message that's engaging enough at the right time that provides a lot of a value message for them, because the choice for live entertainment, as you know, like we just noted, is pretty plentiful in the summertime here in Toronto. And sort of that's our biggest challenge. So we collaborate with our marketing communication team as much as we can and sort of what are the channels of communications where we can engage people. Social media, TV, traditional media, like, even just, we call it hand-to-hand combat, where Maddie experienced where we're calling people, our past buyers, or we're emailing everyone, and sort of where are the touch points and the timing. What I've learned through some of my mentors, sales in general is timing and fit, right? And sort of like, what's the timing of the person? Does it fit their budget or fit their value proposition of their interest? And did we hit them at the right time or hit that person at the right time with the right message? And sort of that's what we're trying to do right now. There is some math, there's some data analytics behind it. There is some strategy behind it. But in the end, it's like what we call as personalization at scale. It's something is a term that's been thrown around in sporting events, is how do we personalize a message to a big scale audience, right? That's one of the challenges. If we email something or they see an ad, is it integrated with other social media channels at all the same time? And you see it when you're on your scrolling on social media, you see an ad on your feed, and then you see an ad on TV, then you maybe hear it on the radio, then it's word of mouth. Is that the right message for me? Or is it the right message for Mal? Is it the right message for Jackson? Is it all the right message at the right time? And that personalization at scale is the biggest challenge in ticket sales and in consumer sales. Right? If you get hit right away with a message and you're like, oh, I thought about that. Yeah, okay, I'll call my friend and let's go to the event. And also, what's trending, what's hot? That's always the big thing. Right now, congratulations to Toronto Blue Jays. Like everybody wants to go to the playoff game this weekend coming up. But for us, just going back, Serena Williams announced her retirement on Tuesday, the week of our event. And the impact that had on ticket sales was incredible. But our job was to make sure that we timed the message as soon as we knew, is to time the message to get that out to our fans, to get that out to new fans who may not be thinking of tennis, saying you're going to have the greatest athlete in the world play her last match here in Toronto. Like, how do you get that message out to a lot of people at the right time, right? And sort of those are the challenges that we face strategically, not just the weekend of the event, but leading up to the National Bank Open.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, that day was absolutely nuts, but it was a pretty awesome experience. So like as we've heard, you have lots of experience in the industry and in sales. Can you expand on why you love this avenue so much in the industry? Because like you said yes a whole bunch of times and you keep coming back. So what motivates you to come back and do sales?
I think because it's part of life, to be honest. Like I think sales, the biggest thing for me is interacting with people, right? It's like we're social animals, we're social creatures. Sales is the perfect avenue to do that, right? You're building relationships, you're developing relationships over time, like genuine relationships. You have a common purpose, which for this is tennis, right? Is the tennis event here in Toronto, and sales does that for you, right? It for me, it's like I always grew up as a people person, not your social butterfly per se, but I really enjoyed having conversations with people, and sales brings me that. Sales is storytelling, right? There's an equation where it's like in sales, it's storytelling plus feeling of emotion equals sales. That's the equation, right? And storytelling and feelings of emotion is our human nature. Like we tell stories to each other. We try to bring value to each other. And that's what sales is. And sort of like in any position you hold in your career, you're going to have to be able to do those two things. You're going to have to story tell about something, and you're going to have to provide a feeling of emotion to convert or sell something. You have to. That's part of your job. If you're a marketer, you need a marketing budget. Well, you're going to have to tell the story. You're going to have to build an emotion or feeling to get that marketing budget from your chief marketing officer. If you're an entrepreneur, what is your brand? What is your story? What kind of feeling are you going to bring to your customers or your audience to bring revenue or to sell? So that's what sales really is. It's every day. Like it's funny, I'm a father of two boys. They try to sell me something all the time. Dad, if I do this, can I get this? Dad, if I do this, can I get this? They're trying to sell something to me all the time. And so that's why sales is sort of like it's an everyday skill. It's a foundation you need to develop for any career you get into. Sales is a foundational component of sort of where the journey will take you. Teachers are trying to sell you something every day. You're gonna have to do homework. If you don't do this, this is gonna happen. So there's a negotiation, and sort of sales is that practice, is that skill set that you really, really need. That's why I always keep coming back to it. That and it's people, man. It's all about the people. I love talking to people. I love having genuine conversations about something that is valuable to each other, that brings an emotion, that you can tell a story. And sort of in the end, that's what it's all about. And sort of that's why I love this avenue. I love this career. Um, I don't think I'd be able to do anything else, to be honest.
No, I mean, I've known some people in sales. They same way. They love building that connection with people. They love meeting new people every day. Love hearing stories. So, I mean, that's definitely a route that people can take. I do have one little side question for you, not related to the industry at all. So you went to University of Windsor. I'm also from Windsor, so
There you go, Lancer.
Lancers. Yep. Even though I'm a Badger now, not a Lancer. So I just have one. What was your favorite part of Windsor?
Oh, that's a tough one. Uh, uh, our it would have to be the people there. Again, I'll go back to the people. I actually enjoy the locals. Like I'll say locals because I'm from Toronto. It's like we're a different world. We're from Toronto to Windsor. I met a lot of good people who grew up in Windsor, and I was lucky enough to see around the city or town, and sort of the people and they were just fun people, man. Like they really like you come from big city Toronto and you just go to Windsor, you think you have an ego. It's like they really know how to like the mom and pop shop restaurants that we go to. Like they really the hospitality was really really genuine. And sort of like the people that I met there who were from Windsor. I mean, they're still my bestest friends to this day, like more than the people I met here in Toronto. And sort of like we still talk, we still trade stories. And so the best thing about Windsor was just probably the people, but sort of like this is so long ago. There's a couple of establishments that I used to frequent that I don't want to say on this podcast. But those people, like the people that I met through those establishments, were quite genuine. And that would be my favorite part of Windsor. I was there actually this past summer for a baseball tournament for my son, and just driving around and going back to the school and seeing all the other the establishments that used to go are no longer around, unfortunately. But talking to some old friends who still live there and just trading stories and sort of these places here that we used to frequent often. Those are the memories that I'll always have and always go back to when I talk to them. So I think with Windsor, it's more of the genuine relationships that really the school itself was great. Like the school has invested a lot in some of the Human Connects program, especially the St. The St. Denis Center where we used to have classes, sort of the athletic center, much better than when I was there. But I'll say the best thing about Windsor would probably be, I don't know if it's still there, but was the bar we used to frequent. It was Faces. Is Faces still there? Right beside the St. Denis Center.
I don't. I'll be honest. Again, I haven't actually been legal age in Windsor yet, so came up to St. Catharines when I was 17, so haven't had the
Oh,
chance
jeez.
to actually drink too much down in Windsor. So I'm not too sure too much of the like what the places are down there. So
Circle back because of the people, but there was this one place near the casino. I think it was called Jake's. My memory again, Jake's Burger Joint, and we went there with a friend of mine, memory, and I ordered the 2 pound hamburger with everything, and it took me about 2.5 hours to finish that. So Windsor, that would be my best memory.
I
I
mean,
don't know if it's still there though.
I think that's one of the first food answers I've gotten that's not related to the pizza. I always try to how
Well,
good.
I don't think it's there. I think it's illegal to serve 2 pounds of meat now. But
That's funny.
if you ate it in a certain amount of time, you got it for free and you got your picture on the wall. I don't know if that's still there though. I think they probably tore that out of a restaurant, put a parking lot for when Caesars took over the casino.
Yeah.
Well, we've had some great talk here about the industry and different experiences, but we like to have some fun too and
Yeah.
talk about the sport that you're involved in. So I'm gonna the question I want to ask is, what is your most memorable sellout crowd?
Again, aging myself, it'd be 2014. 2014 on the Saturday semifinal round, we had the big four of tennis playing on that day. Roger Federer, Rafael Nadal, Novak Djokovic, and Andy Murray were all playing in the semifinals that day. And that sellout crowd of both sessions, of the day session, night session, was absolutely incredible, and the tennis was unbelievable. And sort of, I think it was 2014. Yeah. And sort of that year was absolutely incredible. And I think probably again this past summer, I think it's a one and above because as you know the events changed, WTA Tour and ATP Tour, so I have to throw in Wednesday night with Serena Williams this past summer. Like there wasn't a dry eye. There probably wasn't, but there wasn't a dry eye for our staff watching again the greatest athlete of our sport, and in any sport I would debate that to anyone. Um, hanging up here in Toronto. Like, if her last match in Toronto, obviously she played the US Open, but make that announcement and have her play her last match, one of her last matches here in Toronto was memorable sellout crowd. I think that was up there as well with on the ATP Tour having the big four in the semifinal round here. Because you don't see those things, right, in sort of the other tennis events. And that's to have Serena gift us that moment on center court is probably most memorable. And being a tennis fan, being a tennis person, or just being an athlete, and what she's done for the sport and sort of transcending, and what those guys have done to the sport on the men's side. To have those guys here, those two are probably one of my greatest memories here at the tennis event.
No, for sure. And so then earlier you also talked about how you made some international contacts. So what was your favorite tennis tournament that you have attended around the world?
Hands down the U.S. Open, right? Like in New York City, it's the we call it the Super Bowl tennis, right? It's like you go to New York City and those 2 weeks in New York City is engulfed with tennis. They embrace that event. It is the Grand Slams of Grand Slams. Like you can't beat it. The vibe, um, uh, getting there from downtown Manhattan to Flushing Meadows, it's like a 40-minute train ride. But when you get on that train, it's tennis. Everyone's talking about it. And then as soon as you get off, you walk down this bridge and this path, and you enter the grounds, Flushing Meadows, and it's just you get encapsulated. You get so immersed in sort of the energy. There's nothing like a night session in New York City for tennis. It's incredible. The energy, um, it's I can't say enough. It's incredible. It's not just tennis fans. It's just everyone. You meet people from around the world. Obviously, other tennis fans and just event fans. And then you hear about who's in the crowd and the celebrity and just the posh of it and just all the glamour. It's incredible. And yeah, it is the Super Bowl of tennis. So if anybody out there has never been, definitely the U.S. Open is top notch. Can't beat it. Next to the National Bank Open here in Toronto.
I was gonna say we have to shout out Toronto, but well, Jason, we've had a great conversation here today. We've learned a lot about your path and your experiences, and why you love tennis so much. So we want to thank you tremendously for being a guest on the SPIMA Council podcast today. Jackson and I really appreciate it. And we'll give you final thoughts. So anything you want to close off with, but we're really happy to have you on, and thanks for your time today.
The only final thought is really, again, sports is a unique industry like nothing other. And if this is the career path you want to choose, stay with it. Work hard, network as best you can. I am now available for any emails and questions at any time. But there's nothing like it. And in the end, we love what we do, and that's the one thing in terms of how you define success. I love what I do here. I love the organizations, and it's not work, right? It's in the end, it's sort of the passion, it's the love, it's the not just for the sport, but for our purpose, which is really we better the lives of Canadians through the sport of tennis. And if you think of that every day, it's sort of like I smile ear to ear because I know I'm doing something um, for my fellow man, for my fellow woman, for the boys and girls who are playing tennis. I know what I do impacts their life in a positive way through the sport of tennis. And that's the purpose of what we do here. And if you could find that within the industry, then that's your definition of success. And so that's how I look at it. And hopefully that message will translate to you guys as well as you go on to your journey.
No, I think that's a great message. And again, on behalf of the SPIMA Council podcast, thank you for coming on.